Ladies and gentlemen, we finally made it. Adachi and Shimamura Volume 12 is here. I have been waiting a long time for this one. The first chapter translated released a few days ago. I was in school, I finished my final, and I started reading it then, and I've been working on the video since. But let me just say, I'm pausing all the videos that I'm currently working on to push this out. So we may be waiting a little longer for those, which I apologize for. But I've been waiting a long time for this one. So, similar to the recent Adachi and Shimamura volumes, the first chapter of Volume 12, titled If Adachi Were a Teacher, does take place in an alternate timeline, and in this timeline, Adachi is a teacher and Shimamura is a grade school student in Adachi's class. And for the most part, the highlight of this chapter is child Shimamura. We already knew what Shimamura was like as a child from Volume 11, but this kind of adds on to what we know. Shimamura is energetic, and according to Adachi, she's the very image of innocence. She has a lot of friends, which we knew. Once again, she acts awfully silly, which isn't that surprising given that she's a child. But something that kind of stands out throughout this chapter is Shimamura's fixation towards Adachi. Ever since Adachi began teaching Shimamura's class, Shimamura has always initiated conversation with her, tried to talk to her, just as a whole has tried to be together with Adachi, and this leads to Shimamura asking Adachi out on a date. I thought that this was pretty strange at first too, since they have a grade schooler and teacher relationship at this time. So just to let you guys know, Adachi stays very professional throughout all of this. So Adachi agrees to the date, believing that it's just Shimamura being Shimamura with her silly games. However, once again, since this is with a student, Adachi restricts them to the school premises. After finding a spot and speaking for a little while, Adachi goes to ask Shimamura out of curiosity why she chose to ask her out on a date, and Shimamura, grade school Shimamura, confesses her love for Adachi in response. So Adachi, being confused and generally trying to keep this as professional and as appropriate as possible, states that she loves all her students as a response to Shimamura's confession. Unsatisfied by Adachi's response, Shimamura tells Adachi that that's not the type of love that she means, resulting in Adachi saying that she does love Shimamura in an attempt to satisfy her. And following this, we also get some really interesting information about the Adachi of this timeline that I meant to go over at some point in this video. And that's actually about her relationship with her mother. Now, we know that our Adachi, the Adachi that we usually see within this series, has a not so good relationship with her mother Atsuka. However, this Adachi, this alternate timeline Adachi, does have a good relationship with her mother, and the two actually consistently talk, and there's not really any animosity from either party. And what's interesting about this is, since this is an alternate timeline, it only makes sense that events in this timeline will also be different from the events in our main timeline. And a defining event that shapes our usual Adachi's character is the time when Adachi was a child and her parents brought her to the zoo. When at the zoo, Adachi saw a stuffed animal that caught her eye. However, Adachi was too scared to ask for it, beginning the trend of Adachi being too afraid to reach out to people. It's not an overstatement to say that this one event created the Adachi that we know and love today. This chapter was also animated in the manga. It might have been in the anime, not too sure on that. I do know that the manga has animated this chapter, and I will be having that on screen. However, in Volume 12, these events are different. While Adachi is at the zoo, she's still too scared to ask her parents for the stuffed animal. However, this time, Atsuka realized what Adachi wanted and bought it for her, effectively changing the entire course of Adachi's life. And the cherry on top is that Adachi, who's monologuing all these events, also proposes a question. She wonders how different her life would have been had her mother not brought her that stuffed animal, and, well, as we know, not only is her entire life different, but even Adachi as a whole is completely different. This is an Adachi that never suffered from social anxiety. This is an Adachi who never met Shimamura growing up, and all of this ties back to that exact event in Adachi's life that changes all of this, and I found this to be incredibly interesting. Following this, we get something even more interesting that I actually really want to talk about. After hearing a mysterious laugh from behind her, Adachi looks up, only to be greeted by a cattail swaying back and forth behind Shimamura. And this cattail didn't belong to a cat, it actually belonged to a girl. Can you guys guess who this is? I'm sure you can. If you hadn't, this is Yashiro, Yashiro was in the midst of checking the connection between Adachi and Shimamura in this timeline to see if they've met or not, and after establishing the connection, she honestly just leaves. It's not that I necessarily want to focus on. I want to focus on Adachi's perspective on Yashiro, because this is the first time that Adachi sees Yashiro in this timeline. And Adachi draws considerable amounts of connections between Kid Shimamura and Yashiro, which generally isn't too surprising since Shimamura herself has done this same thing, stating that when she was a child, she was a lot similar to Yashiro. However, Adachi also says that their personalities match in some ways. Now, throughout the series, there's been considerable amount of comparison between Shimamura and Yashiro, sometimes coming from Shimamura herself, and now we're hearing it from Adachi too in a completely different timeline. So at this point, I'm starting to believe that there is a additional connection between Shimamura and Yashiro that we don't know. Now, I'm not going to get into this too much because now I have a new video idea, but let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that there is another connection between Shimamura and Yashiro aside from the promise that we see in the Blu-ray discs? I feel like Iruma Hitomo wouldn't constantly give us these little comparisons throughout this series for no reason. Anywho, since we've already kind of dug into the meat and potatoes of this volume, we can kind of fast forward to the end of this volume since we're already close. Adachi makes a promise that when Shimamura is old enough they can get married. The chapter ends with Shimamura and Adachi, 12 years later, with an older Shimamura who has freshly graduated high school who still is fully intent on getting married to Adachi, thus concluding the chapter, and we can assume that they got married afterwards. This chapter was honestly really interesting. I think it brought some things to the surface that may or may not be worth discussing, and it's also interesting seeing how such a small event can change the course of these characters' lives. Not even really these characters, how such a small event could change all of our lives. I think this was an interesting first chapter, but I've seen a lot of people say that they don't really like these time skip chapters, or these alternate timeline chapters, which completely makes sense. People want to see our characters, I want to see our characters, and I'm sure we're hopefully going to get a lot of that. There's also an additional part of this chapter. The next part focuses on Hino and Naga Fuji, and since honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I'm not really too invested in this couple and I want to get this video out as soon as possible, we're going to skim through. Sorry my Hino and Naga Fuji enjoyers. If you guys really want me to cover everything about Hino and Naga Fuji, let me know. I can try to get more invested into them, but I personally just haven't found them to be too interesting. So basically, Naga Fuji goes over to Hino's house, the usual, but this time she wants to discuss what-if questions, since those are apparently popular in the world as of now. This leads to Hino asking, what if Naga Fuji never met Hino? And to this, Naga Fuji simply says that she'd go and look for Hino. This part ends with Hino coming to the realization that if Naga Fuji was never there, she'd probably be sinking into the earth ready to vanish, leading the two to mutually express how lucky they are to have never needed to look for each other. Another satisfying ending, and it makes me want to ask a question. I asked the same question a year ago, I believe, but more in the form of a statement. Do you guys think it's possible that a Yashiro-like entity, maybe a brethren, or generally some other life form similar to Yashiro, could be out there helping all the Hinos and Naga Fujis to find each other throughout these timelines? Let me know what you guys think on that, because I'm honestly not sure. That's going to conclude my first video back. In Adachi and Shimamura video, I'm probably never going to go this long without posting an Adachi and Shimamura video again. I love this series, and I'm kind of ready to get back into YouTube, get back into posting, and I have a lot of free time now, so that's what I'm going to be doing. Expect more videos from me very soon. Like I said earlier, I kind of paused those videos I was working on to push this out, so I can talk about it while it's still relevant, I guess we'll say. But with that said, that's going to end this video. Thank you so much if you guys made it this far, and I'll see you all in my next one.